It just continues, doesn't it? It's like nonstop. So, and it depends. There's a lot of variables, right? If you're an only child, you definitely didn't have any rivalry, if you will. But you have the oldest child syndrome, you have the youngest child syndrome, and then, Lord be with, the middle child, right? The middle child. Yes, ma'am? The middle child had, yeah, betrayal all over the place, right? Or you could be only male, only female, right? Kelly and I actually are opposites in that perspective. She was the only female in her family. She had brothers. I was only male. I had sisters, and so we actually brought this great perspective to each other from the life that we lived. But someone probably was favored. Someone was probably favored. You might have had children competing to get attention, right, from the parents. You might have had children teaming up against another. So I mentioned we're going to be looking at Joseph. I mentioned we're going to be looking at the life of Joseph in the book of Genesis. In this first study that we're going to be in, Joseph's brothers were tending to their father's flock, and Jacob sent Joseph to check on them. The brothers spotted Joseph coming towards them and quickly developed a plan to dispose of him. And then they adjusted the plan as they went along. They sold him to traders, who in turn sold him to Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard in Egypt. All the while, God was with Joseph and made him successful with his Egyptian master. This particular lesson is about God's presence in times of betrayal. God's presence in times of betrayal. We often think of God, I believe, we think of God when we've been betrayed. And I'm saying that like we've all been betrayed. And I don't know if that's a true statement or not, but I would tend to say everybody in here has been betrayed at one point in your life. It may have been a childhood betrayal, right? It may have been an adult betrayal. And I'll give you some examples here in a second. The thing that we can remember or should remember is we've never been betrayed by God, right? Never been betrayed by God. He's always working for our good. Even when we don't realize it, He's working. He's in our presence working. We'll see in the book of Joseph, in the book of Genesis, Joseph was deeply affected when his own brothers betrayed him, yet God was there the whole time. If you'd like to go ahead and turn, we're going to be in Genesis 37. Genesis 37, 19 through 27. And then we're going to jump over to Genesis 39, 1 and 2. And as you're turning there, it's good to remember, if you've never read the book of Genesis, you should read the book of Genesis. Fascinating read, right? It's in that book that God lays out the great design for God's redemption plan, or redemptive plan. From the beginning, you have creation. You have the fall of Adam and Eve. You have the flood with Noah, the call of Abraham, and the promise. The very first time we see the promise of the Redeemer is in Genesis, right? All the way back in Genesis 3:15, where He says He will crush Satan's head. That promise, as that promise unfolds, we'll see how it involves Joseph as we go through this study. And in this particular passage that we're going to be in, Joseph was given a dream that he didn't understand. And he didn't know he carried a message that would unlock the mercy unlock the mercy and love that God has in a tangible way for him. Joseph reveals a picture of long suffering, redemption, and reconciliation. So let's go ahead and jump over to the scriptures, and I'll read these. Now, a little warning here real quick. I've done this with the other passages that we've looked at. I always struggle if I just go to these scriptures, right? I like to start a little ahead. So I'm going to start with Genesis 37:1. I'm going to read us all the way through chapter 37. So it's a little bit of a long read, but it gives you some of the background, and you can see some things that you may not pick up on if we just started with 19. So I'm going to start in verse 1. It says, now Jacob, and this is, to me, the start of Genesis, this chapter has a weird start to it, and I'll point that out here in just a second. I'm not saying that the Bible's weird. Jeff's weird the way he's reading it. But now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, that's the part that bugs me, right? Because it's talking about Jacob, then all of a sudden it jumps to Joseph. But it's given history here. Joseph being 17 years, and I'm reading out of New King James. Joseph being 17 years old was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel, which is Jacob, loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a tunic or a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him, and they could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream. This is the dream I was talking about, one of the dreams. Joseph had a dream, and he told his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed to my sheaf. Right? And his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have a dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his fathers and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him. But his father kept the matter in mind. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Then he said to him, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out to the valley of Hebron and went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? And he said, I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. So that's all the background we just talked about, right? We haven't even gotten into the text, but we're seeing Jacob who's favoring his son. We're seeing this robe that he has. We're seeing this dream where he says, you guys are going to bow down to me. Then he has another dream where he says, you guys and mom and dad are going to bow down to me, right? He doesn't really realize what he's saying when he's saying this to them. He's just telling them what the dream is. It doesn't say. We should not do. I do agree with that. But we do. What if? What if? So let's read on through the text. Now, starting in 19. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore and let us kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him, and we shall see what comes of his dreams. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, and the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. And they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, and on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. So now we're going to jump forward to 39, 1 and 2. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, right? And Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites. So they sold him to the Ishmaelites, and then they sold him to Potiphar, who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. What do you think about when you hear all that? I mean, there's a lot going on in this passage. This could easily be a TV show, right, with all the drama that's going on. This could make prime time here. Any thoughts before I start jumping into some of the questions? Right. Young. Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Maybe twisting that trial into a testimony, right? That's right. That's right. So let's look a little deeper. Had a pastor once that used to always use the phrase, let's unpack some of these verses. 19 through 24 is where we're going to look at first specifically. 37, 19 through 24. It's hard to imagine a group of brothers wanting to kill one of their own. I mean, think about it. That is really harsh. I mean, I've been upset with my sisters. My sisters may have been upset with me. I'm not sure. But I never wanted to kill them. I mean, that's way out there. We can't justify their aggression, but their jealousy seems very deeply rooted. For example, Jacob's wives, you start breaking this down a little bit further, Jacob's wives were sisters with their own rivalry that they had. And his 12 sons came from Jacob's 12 sons came from 4 different mothers. Worse, as mentioned, Jacob played favorites, right off the bat. He loved Joseph more than his other sons, and he gave Joseph a special robe that identified him as a prince or a person of distinction. And then Joseph didn't help the situation, right? He comes marching in with his robe, and he says, let me tell you about these dreams. So it's just kind of rubbing it in. He's a 17-year-old, right? He probably doesn't really know better. He's just doing what he's doing. And then all of a sudden, the whole family turns on Joseph, and he was betrayed. He was betrayed by his brothers. So pause there for a second, and I don't want an out loud answer on this unless you feel compelled to say it. Have you been betrayed at some time in your life? Think about all those things that you've been through, may have been through. Maybe sharing a secret with somebody, something that was private, and they didn't keep it a secret. That's betrayal, right? Maybe, I think about 17-year-olds when I use this example. There's a party somewhere. Everybody went, everybody got to go, but you weren't invited. You got betrayed by your friends. Or maybe you had this idea at work or at school. Somebody took that idea. I heard that example this week. Somebody talking about that at work. Talk about ironic. Jesus also knows what betrayal is like. When I started thinking about this and trying to put this together, Jesus, where we think he is the Lamb, right? He is the Redeemer. He went through a lot. From a betrayal standpoint, Judas betrayed him to the religious leaders. Peter denied even knowing him, right? And then almost all the other disciples fled Jesus when he was arrested. fled. And then on the cross, my God, why have thou forsaken me? Right? There's a hint of betrayal there. I don't think it was intended that way. There's actually, I've debated on this point. Right? My God, why have thou forsaken me? Was that a feeling of betrayal, or was that Jesus fighting temptation? Right? I tend to think of it that way, because it says to fight temptation, you quote Scripture. That's Scripture. That's Psalms 22:1. Maybe he was quoting Scripture. If anybody wants to debate that one little thing, I'd be happy to debate that with you, just not this morning. The good news is that even in the midst of betrayal, you can trust that God has not abandoned you. You can rest assured that He's always with you and involved in your life. Even when it's not obvious, He's at work. So here's the question. Here's the question that I want some discussion on, that I hope we'll have some discussion. What are your options when you're betrayed? What are your options when you're betrayed? What do you do? What do you do, or what should you do when you're betrayed? Any thoughts? Any comments? Pray about it. Confront the person. Forgiveness. Those are all the right answers.
Typically we get mad at them.
We get mad? Revenge. Escalate. Did y'all know that Connie had a party at her house and I wasn't invited? Right? Jackie, let's go talk about that, right? Because we were both hurt, right?
Why don't y'all have a party and not invite Connie?
Let's have a party and not invite Connie.
Let's invite Jim, though. Never mind, we got to have some food ourselves.
See, the interesting thing is betrayal. It's fascinating because I teach these lessons every week, and then undoubtedly the week afterwards, I have to live out the lesson I just taught. Something comes up, and I have these two little guys on my shoulder saying, "Remember the lesson?" And I have the other guy saying, "No, I don't." What should we do? Because what I see more in this world is you don't talk about it, you get mad, you get sad, right? You don't try to reconcile. Pastor said reconcile, right? Or confront. I don't know which word you used. But isn't that really prayer, reconciliation, discussion? Isn't that really where we should go? Rather than Connie's revenge?
Yeah, and I agree. You have to be careful with confrontation like that too, though, because that'll draw up a whole other can of worms. If you go to them when you're already mad,
Maybe you should pray first.
time in between there.
Jackie, say it. This is supposed to be a safe place, right?
Back and we're talking about, betrayal and all that. And it got my head. I think the first time I ever felt betrayed, I felt betrayed from God when He took my dad.
Yeah.
I was 11 years old, couldn't understand why. And what did I do? I changed my way of living, started drinking at 12, heavily. Just didn't care. I was mad. I didn't care if I woke up in the morning. Life didn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things in my life that, obviously it put me where I'm at now, so I'm happy. And then when we lost our first son, I felt betrayed again. And you can't have revenge. How do you get revenge on God? You can't. All you can do is at that time is turn against you.
Yeah.
And it's rough.
Yeah. What do you do with that?
You can sit here and say what things you want to do and what you can and can't do, but there's some things you can't do when you feel betrayed. You got to take it.
Was God with you?
Every step of the way.
Yeah.
Did I know it at the time?
Right.
Did I care at the time? I took care less. I didn't want to live when I lost my dad. That was my best friend.
Yeah. That's a deep-rooted betrayal, is what I'm going to call it. Right? Feels like betrayal. I'm going to say it's not betrayal.
No.
Right?
I'm older and I've changed my life and turned my life around and I live more for him. I understand it.
Yeah.
And I know that everything happens for a reason, and that was part of his plan. And I understand that now. Do I know why? I still don't know why he took my dad out. When I was that young. Why my dad was that young. My dad was 53. I don't know why still, and I never will until I get up there and ask him.
Do you think you'll ask him?
My mom and my dad.
You think you'll ask him?
Probably not.
Won't matter. You'll be in the presence of the Lord.
I'll be there then. I'll be with him and my dad.
Any other thoughts or comments? Took it on yourself. That's right. That's right. Thank you for sharing that. I want to jump to that here in just a second, that very thought. Let's move on to this next passage, 25 and 27, or 25 through 27. We see here in a single moment that Joseph went from meeting his brothers, right? He's going out to staring death in the face, being thrown in the pit by his brothers. Must have hurt. Remember, there was no water in it. But I bet his brother's apathy hurt him even worse, that his brothers didn't care, and they just picked him up and threw him in the pit. And then, in the midst of all that, they set out a new plan to get rid of him and make $1 off of their brother. So they sold him to this caravan of traders. God probably seemed completely absent to Joseph at that moment, but was he? We have to remember God is always at work in our lives, even in the midst of something as bad as this, or death, or parents having issues, right? God's always, our trust in God always being at work helps us to live our lives with, when we're tempted to feel guilt, right? You have a guilty situation here. You feel guilty because of your parent in that situation. Trusting that God is at work at all times helps us when we think we have our own failures, right? Because you were talking about what did we do so wrong, right? You're trying to figure out, what did I do so wrong? Perhaps took my dad. What did I do wrong? We've potentially had feelings of, I wasn't a faithful parent. I wasn't a faithful brother or a sister or a child when I should have been. I wasn't a faithful child when I should have been. I wasted my life in sinful living. I didn't speak up for Jesus. Have you ever felt guilty about that? I didn't speak up for Jesus when I should have. I had that opportunity, and I lost it. But God works in all things, even our failures. Right? Even our failures, He's working for the good of His people. God can work great things, do great things in spite of our failures. He can take a trial, and Jackie, this is where I go to with you. He takes a trial. You said you didn't know why, but I guarantee you it made you a better man today, right? You may or may not see that. You just said, I don't know why. I may not ever know. You may not ever know. You and I share that same bond with our dads, right? We both have that, and it hurts like nobody can ever imagine. But God's working in you just like He's working in me. God wants strong men to march forward for Him. You got broad shoulders, brother. That's what you need to lean on. Right there. And everybody in this room sees it. And you know what? As your brother, getting that load gets too heavy, I'm here for you. Just like Ron is. Just like Jim is. Just like Howard is. That load gets too heavy, you lean on one another. Because it takes that. God can take a trial and turn it into a testimony. A testimony that you have in this world that needs testimony so bad. So that leads to the second question, right? And we kind of talked about this. But since God is always at work, He's always at work in everything that we do, every situation that we face, every trial that we have, every success that we have, whatever it may be, God's always at work. God's always at work. What is our responsibility when we can't see what He's doing? When we can't see. Trust Him. Trust Him. That's right. Trust Him. Have faith in Him. And know that He's working in and through us. That's your testimony. Right there. That's how He's able to work through you in that hard situation. I'm going to pause there for a second. Thoughts, comments? Right. As a young man, you're leading him to remember that and lean on that verse. This last passage, 39, 1 and 2, it says, and I'm going to read this one now. Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites and had taken him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Verse 2 sums up the main idea of this whole lesson. Right? If you don't take anything from this lesson, go in and underline, circle, highlight, whatever it may be, the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. No matter what it looks like from our perspective, God has not and will not ever abandon us. Joseph may have questioned why all these things had happened to him, but he remained faithful to God. And God remained faithful to him. God doesn't necessarily rescue us from our difficulties. He never promised that at all. But He said He'd be with you at all times. He'd be with you through that. So even after betrayal, how do we behave in ways that show God is at work? Right? If we know that God is with us and we lean upon that, I'm going to change the way I just said that. Not if we know, knowing that God is with us. Right? Knowing that God is with us. How should we behave in times that show God is at work? Right? You got somebody that's been betrayed. What do you do? You've been betrayed. What do you do? We talked about having trust, having faith. Yeah. I want to give a little secret out here for a second. I did not ask permission to give this example, so I may get in trouble. Gonna get a ride home? Occasionally, Kelly and I may not agree on something. Now, she's always right. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. Sometimes I can't see my way. We talked about reaching out to somebody, right? I've changed my ways as I've gotten this gray hair. Chrome hair? Pray first before I do anything, right? Pray first. And it used to be, that prayer used to be, help her to see where she is wrong.
How did that work out?
Yeah, that didn't work out too good. Notice I'm standing over here. It's about me, right? I changed that. Help me. Help me, right? Help me to understand. Help me to, and help us. Help us, right? She's the love of my life. I don't want to get in an argument over something silly.
Jesus said also, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. And if you can't forgive, he said, Jesus said this, I can't forgive you.
Yeah. That needs to be tattooed on all of our forehead. All of us men, right?
That's one thing in the 11 years I had my dad that he taught me. Never go to bed angry with your spouse you love. Always tell them you love them. And don't ever leave the house.
Yeah.
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 You never know what that day holds together. And unfortunately, just the truth. That one we died.
Huh. So God will never betray us or abandon us. How can that truth influence our actions, right? Shouldn't we just lean upon that? That He's always there with us?
Many times I have prayed in situations, just what you said, God, change this situation, change this, change it. And the moment it hit me in the head, actually the moment I realized, I don't understand why He's not changing. And I was getting so frustrated that I started praying, okay, God, change me.
Yeah.
Allow me to accept that I need that quickly. Everything was okay. He actually changed the situation. He was waiting for me to surrender.
That's right. That's right.
What that person or that situation, what the betrayal was, I need to focus on God, teach me how to handle this.
Yeah.
Not try to change it, not try to teach me how to handle this, for example.
Yeah. See, don't dwell on it. Yeah. Yeah. Got to have that speak kind of last, right? So the book offers 3 points advice on what to do when we feel betrayed and we don't know what God is doing in the situation. It says to take a look back, make a list of the different ways God has worked in and through your life, right? We talked in one of the other lessons about journaling. Journaling can be a powerful thing as you pray over situations. You can look back and say, God, I know you worked this in my life before. I've got faith and confidence and trust that you're going to work this situation for me. It also says to forgive yourself. Identify a failure or shortcoming from the past that still produces guilt. Let go of it, right? Let go of it. Give it to God. Give it to God. Choose to let go of the failure and trust in God's ability to work good in and through you. And the last is to forgive others. Identify a betrayal that continues to impact your life. Jackie? Take a step this week towards working through forgiveness of that, right? Just let it go. Just let it go. That one's a hard one. I struggle with the same thing every day. Every day. Thoughts, comments, questions?
I do think there are times, especially when they continue to pray. You just have to cut them off. There's a point where you pray for them, you love them, you try to reconcile, if that doesn't work, continue to pray. You know, you throw them a life raft and they try to pull you down, you got to cut them. They're just going to pull you down, right?
Yeah. Prayer request? Somewhere?